My son's wife came around the corner of the intensive care unit carrying 2 coffees and handed me neither. The nurse had come out to say they were finished with the second scan. She was partway through a sentence about swelling and about the next 24 hours when Shelby stepped forward in a way that put her shoulder half in front of me. People do that without knowing they are doing it. Some of them do. "I'm immediate family," Shelby said. "You can tell me everything." Then she turned back to me with an expression I would have called kind if I had met her that morning for the first time. Would it be easier if Nathan's mother waited in the lounge? "She's had a long drive. There's coffee down there." The nurse did not answer her. She turned to me instead. "Who holds the medical proxy?" "I do," I said. Then I did what I have done for most of my adult life, which is to open my wallet and take out a piece of paper, folded into quarters, and soft at the creases from 12 years of riding behind my insurance card. Not a will, not a trust. A photocopy of a healthcare directive my son signed when he was 24, during his second week at the mill, at a folding table in a break room with a cup of orange juice at his elbow. The nurse read it. She said she would need the original filed, and that a copy would do for now, and she wrote my name on the whiteboard beside the door. I was watching Shelby while that happened. Her face changed, and it was not surprise. I did not have a word for what it was until the 17th of October, and by then it was too late to be gentle about it. Shelby stepped back and said, of course, and touched my sleeve. Then she asked the nurse one more question. It was not about the swelling. It was about visiting hours. Del Pelletier called me at 6:52 that morning. He is my son's foreman, and he has my number because I have had his since 2009, when I walked his back injury through 4 levels of grievance and got him his light duty when the company wanted him gone. He said Nathan had come off the number 3 catwalk, that they were flying him to Lewiston, and that I should not drive fast. I drove fast. Route 108 takes an hour and a half when the road is clear, and that morning it was clear and cold, and the colour was already turning past Dixfield. I thought I should call Shelby. Then I remembered the crew had already called her, because she was listed first, and that this was correct and reasonable, and that I had never once objected to it. I had a thought on that drive I have not been able to put back where I found it. I thought, I hope somebody remembers to tell me things. Not I hope he lives. That came later, at a red light in Auburn, all at once. The first thought was about being told. That is what 14 feet does to a family. It does not create anything. It takes the shape you already had and holds it up to the light. My name is Francis Boudreau. Frankie, to anyone who has known me longer than a week. I am 72, and I gave 31 years to the mill, 11 of them on the finishing floor and 20 as grievance officer for the local. A grievance officer is not a lawyer. A grievance officer is a person who asks 4 questions in a certain order. When did this happen? Who was present? What does the document actually say? And who signed it? I learnt to keep copies in 1998 because of a millwright named Roger Willett, fired for refusing an assignment he had never been given. The company had a form saying he had been trained on that machine. He swore he had never seen it. He was right. I could not prove it, and he lost his job over a piece of paper that existed in exactly one place, in a drawer that belonged to somebody else. After that, I kept copies of everything. Not out of suspicion, out of arithmetic. A copy costs you nothing until the day it is the only thing standing between a person and the worst version of a story. Nathan signed his directive at that break room table because I was standing there telling 12 new hires to fill out the whole packet and not just the parts with money on them. He wrote my name in the agent box because I was the one in front of him. He laughed while he did it. "Congratulations, Ma," he said. "You're in charge of me." If you have ever been the person in your family who keeps the copies, subscribe to her calm justice. This is a story about why that habit matters. Nathan married Shelby 5 years ago in September. She is 33, she manages a dental office, and she is good at things I am not good at. She sends thank you cards. She remembers what people are allergic to. I want to be honest about the 5 years. Because what I see now is not a woman closing a door on me. It is a woman leaning gently on a door, over and over, and me stepping back each time so it would not have to be a fight. The Christmas that moved to their house because it was easier with the baby. The Easter that got skipped because a car ride would be a lot for Ren. The texts that came back 4 days later with a thumbs up. The way my visits started needing to be arranged instead of just happening, each one, by itself, reasonable. I did not put them together, because putting them together would have meant saying something, and saying something would have meant risking the only thing I could not risk, which was the little girl. So I got smaller, and I told myself that a mother-in-law who takes up no room is a gift. And I paid $412 a month toward my son's truck, starting in the spring of 2024, because I heard him on the phone with the credit union one Sunday and heard the sound a person makes when they are being told no. I never told him. I never told her. I wanted him to be able to get to work. I have thought a great deal about whether that was love or whether it was rent. I have decided it was both, and that the second part is my own fault and nobody else's. On the 9th, they moved him out of the unit into a step-down room on 4, and Shelby met me at the elevator with a clipboard. They want a visitor list, she said. It's just so they know who's allowed on the unit. I did it already so you wouldn't have to. I looked at it. She was holding it toward herself, so I was reading it upside down, which, after 20 years of contract negotiation, is not the disadvantage people assume it is. Her name was first. Her mother, who lives in Naples and had not yet flown up, was second. I was third. That's just alphabetical or something, she said, when she saw where my eyes had gone. It was not alphabetical. Boudreau, Francis, would have been first if it had been alphabetical. Shelby's maiden name is Vachon. I did not say that. I said that's fine. What happened in me at that moment was not anger. I ran a phone tree for 406 people for 20 years. I know what an order of contact is. It is not a courtesy. It is a decision about who finds out, and how soon, and from whom. She had made herself the person the hospital calls, her mother in Naples the second, and me the third. I signed in the space she pointed to. My hand was steady. I noticed that it was steady, the way you notice weather. Ren was in the family lounge the next afternoon with a sticker book and a juice box, working very hard at putting a dolphin exactly in the middle of a page. She is 4. She calls me Mémère, which is what I called my own grandmother, and which Shelby learned to pronounce properly within a week of meeting me, and which I have never forgotten that she did. I sat down on the floor beside her chair, which took me a moment, and she gave me the sheet with the fish on it and told me I could do the ocean. Then she said, "Are you allowed to be here?" Children ask the plainest question available. It is not cruelty, it is efficiency. "Yes," I said, "I'm allowed." Mummy said the nurses have rules. "They do?" I said. "I'm one of the rules." She thought that was funny. She put a starfish on my wrist. Shelby came in 10 minutes later with a bag of pretzels and sat on the floor with us, and she was good with her. She is good with her. She knows how to break a pretzel into a size that will not scare a 4-year-old, and she knows to say, "One more page, then shoes," so the ending is not a surprise. I watched her do it, and had to look at the carpet a moment, because it would be so much simpler if she were a monster. She is not. She is a person who has decided that the way to keep her family safe is to hold all of it in her own 2 hands, and who has never once considered that this might be the thing that breaks it. That is worse, in a way. A monster you can simply oppose. On the 12th, I came off the elevator on 4, and his room was empty and stripped. A housekeeping cart stood in the doorway. The whiteboard had been wiped. I stood there long enough for a woman with a mop to ask if I needed help, and then I went down to the nurses' station and asked where Nathan Boudreau had been moved to. The clerk looked at her screen and said, 412, and then she looked up. "You're the mother. You're on here." "Am I?" "You're the agent," she said. "You'd have gotten the call." I had not gotten a call. That was the moment it stopped being a feeling and started being a fact, and facts are the only things I have ever known how to work with. The record was correct. My name was where it belonged. The unit had my number. And somewhere between the record and the room, someone had told somebody that Nathan's mother did not need to be notified, and it had been said, pleasantly enough, that nobody thought to check. That is not a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is symmetrical. This only ever went one direction. I walked to 412. Shelby was arranging his things on the windowsill, and she said, "Oh, they moved him. I meant to text you." And she meant it, in the way people mean things they have decided are true. I drove up for clean clothes the next morning and caught Dell in the mill lot at the 7 o'clock whistle. He told me what happened on the catwalk, which was nothing dramatic and nobody's fault, a grate that was fine on Tuesday and not fine on Wednesday. Then he stood there, turning his hard hat over, and I could tell there was a second thing. He was off that morning, Dell said. Not unsafe off. Just off. He said he was tired of being in the middle. In the middle of what? He didn't say. He said it like I'd know. Dell looked at the mill. He said something back in August about a lawyer thing. I figured wills. He's 36. That's what I said. Dell put the hat on. He didn't laugh. I drove back to Lewiston with the heater on high and the windows cracked, which is a thing I do when I am trying to stay in exactly one thought. August. He had never mentioned an appointment to me, not once, and my son has told me about every oil change he has ever paid for. He woke up on the 14th. Nobody tells you what waking up actually looks like. On television, a man opens his eyes and says a name. What happened in room 412 was that Nathan was awake, in the sense that his eyes were open, and he was talking, and was not there, in the sense that mattered. He knew me. That was the cruel part, the part that let me lie to myself for 2 more days. He said, "Ma," and squeezed my hand. Then he asked where his boots were. I told him. He nodded. 4 minutes later, he asked where his boots were. I told him again. He nodded again, in exactly the same way, with exactly the same small relief. He asked 4 times in 9 minutes. I counted, because counting is what I do when I cannot do anything. And on the 5th time, he did not ask about the boots. He said, "Ma, did I sign it?" "Did you sign what, honey?" "The thing at the office." Then his face went smooth again, the way it did every 4 minutes, and he asked me where his boots were. I sat through 2 more loops, and he never came back to it. The nurse explained it in the hallway. She said the words post-traumatic confusion, and that it is common and expected, and can last 2 weeks or longer, and that recent memory goes first, while older memory can stay perfectly intact, that a man in this state can lose the last 4 minutes and keep a worry he has been carrying since August. "He can sign his name," I said. She looked at me a second longer than the question deserved. "Yes," she said, "he can hold a pen." I went and sat in the chapel on 2, which I have no use for, because it was the only room in that building where nobody was going to ask how I was doing. And I made myself say it plainly, the way I would have said it to a member across a table. There is a man upstairs who is awake and cooperative and cannot hold 4 minutes. He has been afraid since August of something he signed or did not sign. And he is married to a woman who has not mentioned an office to me once. 2 days later, Shelby brought me a coffee, the good kind from the place on Sabata Street, and sat down beside me in the hall and was quiet for a minute in a way I understood was preparation. "I want to say thank you," she said, "for being here every day. I know it's a drive. He's my son." "I know." She turned the cup around. "Can I ask you something, and can you not take it wrong?" I said she could ask. "The proxy thing. It's making everything so complicated. Every time there's a form they have to track you down, and half of them call me first anyway because I'm the wife, and then they get in trouble for it." She laughed a little. "There's a way to sign it over." You'd release it, and it defaults to spouse, and then it's simple. She did not say simple like a lie. She said it like a woman who had been awake for 9 days. And I have thought since about how close I came, because I was tired too. I said no, once, in a normal voice, and I did not decorate it. No, not while he can't tell me himself that's what he wants. Shelby's face did something quick, and then put itself away. She said, "Okay," and "I'm not trying to fight with you," and she took her coffee and went to find Ren. Then I bought a legal pad in the gift shop and sat in the Corolla on level 3 of the parking garage and opened a file for the first time in 7 years. October 7th, 9:15 a.m. Present, C. Thibodeau, RN, S. Boudreau, self, S. Boudreau. Stated she was immediate family and requested that I wait in the lounge. RN asked who held the proxy. October 9th, visitor list presented. Order of contact, S. Boudreau, D. Vachon, self. October 12th, patient transferred 407 to 412, no notification to agent. October 14th, patient asked whether he had signed the thing at the office, unable to elaborate. October 16th, request to release agency. I wrote for 40 minutes, and I did not add opinions. I know what an opinion does to a statement, which is to give the other side something to argue with instead of the facts. Then I looked at it and understood something I did not enjoy. I had known how to do this the entire time. For 5 years I had known how to do this, and I had chosen not to, and I had called that choice being a good mother-in-law. The business card was in the bag of belongings that came down from the unit, which I had signed for on the 7th, and which nobody had ever asked me to give back, a firm in Lewiston. On the back, in my son's handwriting, Tues 8/26, 2:30. I did not call them to ask what he had discussed. They would not have told me, and they should not have. I called to ask the one question I had a right to ask, which is the question I have asked on other people's behalf for 20 years. Has my authority been superseded? I gave the paralegal his name and date of birth. I said I was the agent named in his advance healthcare directive, that he was hospitalized and not able to direct his own affairs, and that if a more recent directive had been executed at their office, the hospital needed it on his chart today, and I needed to stop acting under mine. She put me on hold for 6 minutes. There is no executed advance directive in this file, she said. Your authority hasn't been superseded. I thanked her and hung up and sat in the garage with the phone in my lap. That is all she gave me. It was enough, because I have spent my whole working life reading the shape of the thing that is missing. There had been an appointment. My son had gone to it. He had come out carrying a question he was still asking 6 weeks later, with a broken head, and there was no document. He had sat down in that office and not signed, which meant that on the 7th of October, at 9:15 in the morning, in a corridor in Lewiston, my daughter-in-law knew exactly whose name was in the agent box. She had known since August. She had watched him decline to change it. She was not surprised when that nurse turned around. She had no reason to be. She was only surprised that I had a copy. I sat there a long time, thinking about the step stool. Nathan built it in 8th grade shop the year I tore my shoulder on the line and could not reach the top shelf. Pine, 2 coats of poly, 1 leg a 1/4 inch short so it rocks. It is in their pantry now. Shelby uses it for the flour. It is there because I carried it over there myself, one Thanksgiving, when she said offhand that she could never reach anything, and I handed it to her, and nobody took it. That is the part I had to sit with, not what she did. What I handed over, cheerfully, for 5 years, so that nothing would have to be said. The next week I did the other thing a grievance officer does, which is to stop guessing and start asking. I found Colette Thibodeau at the end of her shift and asked a narrow question. Not what has Shelby been doing. I asked whether Nathan had signed anything since admission other than hospital paperwork. She said she would have to check, and then she said she did not have to check. On the 16th of October, Shelby had come to the desk with 2 documents and asked whether someone on the unit could witness her husband's signature. The nurse that afternoon looked at him and looked at his chart and said no. Not no, we're busy. No, because he was not oriented to place or date, and the unit does not witness signatures for a patient in that condition. I asked whether the refusal was written down. It's in the notes, Colette said. We document a declined witness. I asked whether she had seen what the documents were. Credit union letterhead, that's all I looked at. He signed them anyway. That is what I understood standing at that desk. Somewhere in this building, on the 16th of October, my son signed his name to 2 credit union documents in his own hand, 6 days after coming off a catwalk, in a stretch when he could not hold 4 minutes, and the only people who declined to be part of it were the nurses. Nobody broke a law that afternoon. Somebody put a pen in the hand of a man who could still write and could not still decide. The next morning, the 23rd, I asked to speak to the care team, and I asked for a formal neurocognitive evaluation. Shelby had been putting it off, not refusing putting off. He's tired. Let's see how the week goes. He was great yesterday. Ask the day nurse. Every deferral had a reason attached, and every reason was the kind you cannot argue with without sounding cold. I did not tell her I had asked. I chose not to, because I had stopped believing she and I were trying to find out the same thing. I'm not asking whether he's competent, I told the team. That's not my word, and it's not my call. I'm asking you to put on his chart, with dates, what he is and is not able to decide right now. If he's fine, I'd like that written down. If he isn't, I'd like that written down too. Paula Sear, the social worker, somewhere in her 50s, with the flat, unhurried manner of a woman who has heard every family in the state of Maine, looked at me a moment. Is there a decision in front of him you're concerned about? There have been decisions in front of him for 2 weeks, I said. I'd like to know what they were worth. She wrote it down. I watched her write it. Then she said, I'm going to want everyone in a room. The meeting was the 30th of October, 4 o'clock, a conference room on 4 with a whiteboard nobody had erased and someone else's discharge plan still on it, in green marker. Paula, the neurologist, Colette, Shelby, me, Nathan, 2 floors down in 412 and unable to be there, which was the entire point and which everybody understood without saying it. I set my legal pad on the table where it could be seen and left it closed. The neurologist summarized. Nathan's orientation had fluctuated through the 3rd week. His recall was improving. The evaluation had been completed on the 28th, and the report would be on his chart within the week. Then Paula said, Francis, you asked for this. I did. I looked at Shelby, not at Paula. On the 7th of October, in the corridor on 2, you told the nurse you were immediate family and asked whether it would be easier if Nathan's mother waited in the lounge. Those were the words. That's not fair. I'm not finished, and I'm not accusing you of anything yet. I'm asking about 3 dates. I put one finger on the closed pad. August 26th, October 7th, October 16th. August was estate planning, she said. Both of us. Wills, powers of attorney, the whole packet. It's what you do when you have a small child. And Paula, who had not been briefed by me, who I had told nothing, who simply does this for a living, asked the follow-up. Was it scheduled for both of you, or in his name? Shelby did not answer for long enough that the answer arrived without her. I made the appointment. To do what? I said. To update his directive. To take my name off it. To put mine on it. I'm his wife. He didn't sign it. The room did the thing rooms do. Colette looked at the table. The neurologist did not. He sat in that office on the 26th of August, and he did not sign it. I said, and you were there, and you know he didn't, and he is 2 floors down asking me every 4 minutes whether he signed something because it has been sitting on him since summer. And 6 weeks later, you stood in a corridor and told a nurse you were immediate family and asked her to send me to the lounge knowing exactly whose name was on that form. That's not what that was. Then on the 16th of October, you brought 2 credit union documents onto this unit and asked a nurse to witness his signature, and she looked at him and said no. That refusal is in his notes. And he signed them anyway. He wanted to sign them. He couldn't tell you what day it was. Paula let that sit. Then she closed her folder, which I understood was deliberate, and said in the same flat voice she had used all afternoon, "Shelby, is there something you want that you haven't said? This is the room for it." 11 seconds. I counted, because counting is what I do. 11 seconds in which she could have said, "I'm frightened." We're $71,000 underwater, and his disability ends on the 15th, and I need to be the one they call, because if I am not the one they call, I will come apart. Every one of those sentences was true. I found out later that all of it was true. And if she had said any of it in that room, in front of those people, I do not know what I would have done, but I know what I would have wanted to do, and it was not this. She said, "Can I be honest? Nathan's mother hasn't been stable since the accident. She's here every single day." She hovers. She's questioning his care, and she's calling the lawyer's office, and she's going through his personal belongings. Then she turned to Colette and asked whether the unit could restrict my visiting. I did not raise my voice. I have never once gotten anything I wanted by raising my voice, and I was not going to start in a room with a whiteboard in it. I've been here every day, so have you. Only one of us called that hovering. I'm not going to sit here and answer whether I'm stable. Paula, would you read her what I asked you for on the 23rd? Paula did, out of her own note. Mrs. Boudreau requested formal documentation of the patient's decisional capacity, including any period in which capacity was impaired, and asked that the finding be recorded whichever way it went. That's what I asked for, I said. Not to keep you out of his room, not to take one thing away from you, to find out what he was able to decide, and when. And then the last thing, which is the only sentence from that afternoon I would keep if I could keep one. Shelby, I'm not going to ask them to restrict you. I've never once asked them to restrict you. I'd like you to notice that. Nobody restricted anybody. That is not how hospitals work, and I knew it, and she did not. What Paula did before we left was reach for the contact sheet and reorder it out loud as procedure. Agent first. Spouse second. She said it was an error that should have been caught on admission, and she was correcting it now. She did not look at either of us while she did it, and Shelby watched her do it, and I have thought since that it was the only moment all month when something was simply put back where it belonged. I said one more thing in the corridor afterward, quietly, because it was not for anybody else. The report goes on his chart within the week. Whatever you need to do about the 16th, do it before that, and do it with him, not around him. You'd like that, she said. No. I'd like it if you did it, and I never had to know. The report came back on the 6th of November. It documented impairment beginning the 7th of October and continuing through the 4th week of the month, with no single day on which it could be said to have cleanly ended. That is how those reports read. Recovery does not have an edge on it. She did nothing before the 6th. I checked the chart, because I had the right to, and I have never been sorrier to be right about a piece of paper. Because of the wording, they scheduled him for retesting, which is why I was still his agent another 2 weeks, a thing I want on the record. Since I had told him once that an authority you hold over somebody is a debt, and I carried it 14 days longer than I wanted to. They retested him on the 19th. On the 20th, they wrote in his chart that he had capacity. He asked me that afternoon, straight out, what he had missed. I told him in order and without adjectives, and I gave him the report, and I said the rest was his business and not mine. He went to the credit union himself and asked them to look at 2 documents signed on the 16th of October by a man whose chart said what his chart said. They did what credit unions do, which is take a very long time and then reverse them. The refinance did not happen. He moved his accounts into his own name and put his own signature on the card. And I stopped paying $412 a month toward a truck after 32 months and $13,184, which my son learned about from a bank statement at his own kitchen table. I did not tell him to be angry. I did not tell him what to do about his marriage. He is 36, and he did not need his mother handing him a verdict along with everything else. I signed the resignation the same afternoon they charted it. 10 minutes and a witness from the nurse's station, and then I was nobody's agent, which is what I had been for 12 years and had used exactly once. I gave him the photocopy, folded into quarters, soft at the creases, an orange juice ring in the corner from a breakroom table in March of 2014. He looked at it a while. You could have kept it. I could have. You could have used it. I did use it, I said, once. To ask a question I already knew the answer to, so it would be written down where you could find it. He asked why I was giving it up, when holding it would have meant something. I told him the truth, that I did not want to be a person who kept a thing like that. That, an authority you hold over somebody you love, is a debt, not a weapon, and the only decent way to carry one is to put it down the first hour you are allowed to. Then I asked him for the step stool back. Out loud. In those words, I would like my stool back, not hinting, not laughing it off, not waiting to see whether anybody offered. 72 years old, and it was one of the hardest sentences I have ever said, and it took 4 seconds, and he said, "Yeah, Ma, of course," and that was the entire negotiation. I go up to the mill 3 mornings a week now. They needed somebody to run new hire safety orientation, and Dell put my name in, and I said yes before I could talk myself into thinking a woman my age ought to want to rest. 22-year-olds in a break room with a packet in front of them, and I tell them about lockout, tagout, and where the light duty language is, and then, every single time, fill out the whole packet, not just the parts with money on them. Ask for a copy of anything you sign, and keep it somewhere you will still have it in 12 years, because you will not know which piece of paper mattered until the morning it is the only one there is. Some of them listen, some are looking at their phones. Roger Wallett's grandson was in the September class, and he took a copy of every page. Shelby and I are not friends. We are polite, and we are careful, and Wren has her mare on the 2nd Saturday of every month, and any Tuesday I can get down there. And neither of us has ever once used that little girl as a piece on a board, which I have decided is the actual measure of a person, and not the things people say in conference rooms. The stool is in my kitchen. One leg is a 1/4 inch short, and it rocks, and I have never fixed it, and I never will. I stood on it this morning to get the good coffee down off the top shelf, which I can do, which I could do the entire time. Would you have used the proxy the way I could have, or given it back the way I did? I'd like to hear it, because I still turn that afternoon over some nights. Her calm justice, because kindness was never permission.